So thank you very much for joining me this evening. We've got some time together so that I can talk to you about this book, which has recently been published. It's called The Hour Is Come, and the subtitle is Passion in Real Time. And I've spent the past week talking in various different situations to various different groups of people about the book, which has been really, really lovely. I was on an event that Church House Bookshop organised last night with 3 other people who have produced Lent books this year, including Peter Greystone from the Diocese of Southwark, and I've forgotten her name, but the former chaplain to the Archbishop of Canterbury, she's produced one, and a sister. But there's some amazing books coming out, and I hope that you will feel able to buy this one and to share in what I've put together for Lent, but particularly for Passiontide, because the good thing is that you can buy somebody else's Lent book and start off Lent with them, and then when Passiontide comes along, you can kind of then join me in this book, and so you can have lots of bites at different cherries as Lent goes through, which I think is quite exciting. So I just want to begin by explaining to you a bit of the background to the book, because hopefully then you'll get an idea as to why I wanted to do this. So in fact, this is a manifestation of something that I was involved in writing a few years ago, but then it was for an online retreat. We were having a very special Holy Week when we didn't have just one Holy Week preacher and an event. We had lots of different things going on in the cathedral. So we had an icon workshop. We had a jazz retreat that somebody was giving, and I decided to try and do something online. And so that's where this book began, and it's developed from that. And you may well have joined in with that particular retreat. So if you have, then you'll know something of what I wrote. But the reason for thinking that I could do something like this, I have to take you back to the first Gulf War. And looking on the screen, the faces I can see, I think most people will remember the days of the first Gulf War. Now, agonizing time for us, and lots of bad memories from that. But one thing that I do remember was that's when I first became conscious of something that we've got very used to now. And that is rolling news programs. So that was the first time I became conscious of CNN and the way in which 24-hour news was entering our consciousness, and the whole business of those lines at the bottom of the screen, breaking news, so that you could participate in quite a different way in which the news was unfolding. Now, I don't think that's always necessarily a good thing, but it certainly made life quite different in terms of how we consume the news. No longer are we waiting for it all to arrive the next day in our newspapers, or no longer are we waiting to see what it says at 10 o'clock, because we'll have heard it from a number of sources already during the day, ordinarily. So I'm a bit of a news junkie. In the morning, I wake up to the Today programme, and I go to sleep with more news. Often by the time I've got into bed, it's Today in Parliament. So my life is bookended by various programmes on Radio 4 or LBC News, where I'm constantly being updated about what's going on. And I just had a thought about what it would be like if that 24-hour rolling news was operating when the events of the Passion took place. How would the news have been delivered to us at that time, in real time, I've called it? So at the actual time that things are happening, how would we have received it? How would it have felt? At what kind of pace would it have been delivered to us? So I did something that I think, as I say in the book, biblical scholars, proper biblical scholars, would not approve of. I took all four Gospels and closely read the four passion accounts that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John give to us. And I tried then to build from those sources a timeline of what was happening when. Now, the reason I say that I don't think some proper biblical scholars would approve of that is because some of you will remember when Geoffrey John was a canon at Southwark, and every Christmas Geoffrey John used to berate us about the fact that you can't just put together St. Matthew's account of the Nativity and St. Luke's account of the Nativity like you do in a Christmas card and pretend that it all fits together and it's the same story. He said to us, it's two completely different ways of looking at the Nativity. Stop doing it. Stop making carol services where you have readings from all, the two different Gospels and John as well, because you abuse the scriptures. So I apologize to Geoffrey John. I did listen to him, but I've done exactly what he said you shouldn't really do. So that's the health warning on all of this. But I think what it does do by taking the four gospel accounts of the Passion in one go is to help us to begin to see just how that week, Holy Week, and what surrounds Holy Week actually pans out. What happens to Jesus, how one thing follows on from another. And I think that can help us to immerse ourselves in a particular way in those events. And immersing ourselves in those events is, I think, really important. So I went to a church when I was a little boy and growing up as an adolescent, where Holy Week was kept quite fully. So a lot of the traditional services, most of the traditional services of Holy Week were kept within the church, and I was in the choir. So we ended up going to church even more that week than we would ordinarily. And I suppose some of you, a lot of you may have had the same kind of experience. That then was added on to me by going to the College of the Resurrection at Mirfield to train for ordination. When we got to Mirfield, we were very soon informed that by Holy Week, we would be expected to form the community, because the members of the community proper went out at that time and preached Holy Week in parishes around the country and elsewhere, which would have left the choir empty. So then we students kind of filled the choir instead, and we became, as it were, the community of the resurrection for Holy Week. And that meant going to church a heck of a lot. So all of the services of Holy Week, we kept as a community, kept as the college. And that was a really immersive experience for me, because it was exhausting. It was non-stop. We were constantly rehearsing for the services coming up, as well as actually going to church. We had a Holy Week preacher, so we had lectures at the beginning of the week. There was always something happening. So you couldn't sort of escape from the intensity of the week. Now, and I can see one or two faces nodding away who have experienced the same kind of thing. And that lives with you. Now, when I got into a parish, of course, when you're a curate, you can only do what the vicar says you can do. So you come in with lots of good ideas and you say, well, I think we should keep all these services. And they say, well, thank you for that idea. And then we carry on doing what they like to do. When you get to be a vicar, you say the same thing. And then the members of the PCC say, well, thank you very much, vicar. We'll see what turns out. But one of the things I have said, and I think some of you may have heard me say it when we get to Palm Sunday, is don't just come to Palm Sunday and then to Easter Day, because you miss out on everything between. Yes, I can see one or two nodding. People have heard me say that. It's like, you know, watching one bit of Coronation Street at the beginning of the week and another bit of Coronation Street at the end of the week, or Emmerdale or whatever it is that you watch, and you miss out on all the rest of it. You have to listen to the omnibus for the Archers to get the full story. So in the same way, you really need to go through Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I'll come back to Saturday in a moment, in order to arrive at Easter. So it's hard work. It's real sort of commitment that's asked of us during Holy Week as we follow the way of the cross. Now, what the sort of things that we do are quite different to a lot of the life of the church. Many of the services that we have a very, very long history. And the reason that we're able to say that is because around the 3rd, 4th century, there was a nun made a journey from where she was living in an early form of a convent. She went off to the Holy Land, and like many pilgrims to the Holy Land, she kept a journal, and it was a very closely written journal. So she was observing what was going on, not just in Jerusalem, but around the Holy Land and around the Middle East. And Egeria was her name, and we're not quite sure whereabouts around the Mediterranean she came from. Some people think it was from as far away as Spain. Some think it was from nearer to the Middle East. But wherever she came from, she came for a long period of time. It was a long journey that she made, a dangerous journey that she made in order to get there. So she made the most of it when she arrived. And she kept this journal, and in the journal, she noted down exactly what was happening in Jerusalem, for instance, during Holy Week. And from her notes, from her journal, we know what the early church was doing. And in many ways, it is so similar to what we do now. It's well worth looking at the diary that Egeria keeps. You can find it online. And it's just a fascinating read, because you get a direct insight into the life of the early church, and you will recognize so much of what was being done. So I'm going to give you a few readings from what I've written. For each day, there is at least one reading. For each of the chapters, there's a passage from one of the Gospels, so it could be from any of the 4 Gospels. The version, the translation that I've used is the one that we're most familiar with now, the NRSV. And there's a timing. So I'm recommending to you the time when you read this passage. And one of my colleagues, Evelyn, who does all the graphic design at the cathedral, I don't know whether you can see this, she's drawn individual little clock faces. She hand drew all these clock faces for me, so that you can look at the book, you can see the time. 8 o'clock Palm Sunday is this reading. So before you ever set off for church, and somebody has suggested the other day at one of these gatherings that I actually tweet a warning to you to get your book open at that time, which might be a bit annoying for everybody, but that's okay if that helps people to do it. So there's a time to read it, and there's a passage, a reflection, and then I've written a prayer. Most of the prayers in the book are ones I've written for each of those occasions. The one I'm just going to read now is something a bit more familiar to you, but I've tried to sort of, in the way I like to write prayers, be kind of a fresh response that I've made to what I've just been thinking about. Now, on some days, there's probably only one passage. On some other days, they come every 15 minutes. I'll come back to that in a second. So this is 8 o'clock on Palm Sunday, and you'll recognize the reading from St. Matthew's Gospel. The chapter is called A Donkey for a King. When they had come near Jerusalem and had reached Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, just say this: the Lord needs them, and he will send them immediately. This took place to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet, saying, tell the daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put their cloaks on them, and he sat on them. And this is my reflection on that. The night had gone quickly. After the business on the road, they made their way to a place where they could lodge. It was on the other side of the Mount of Olives. Those who had been before knew what a tremendous sight awaited them as they came across the mount and saw the city and the temple for the first time. It was a breathtaking sight. They had walked a long way, and after some food, Jesus surprises them all by asking two of them to go off and get him a donkey. What was that all about? He never rode. He walked. They all walked. But he was insistent and seemed to know exactly where they could find one with its colt. So they went and arrived back not much later with the donkey and the colt. Their cloaks went onto the donkey's back to make it easier to ride, and Jesus mounted, and off they went. As we reflect today, at this very moment, pilgrims will be there now on the Mount of Olives, waiting to walk the path that Jesus rode along. In churches around the world, palms and branches will have been gathered for the services today so that people can wave them and carry them. It's a triumphal beginning of the day and of the week. And of course, that was the point of the donkey for Jesus. And Matthew quotes from the prophet Zechariah in order that we get the reason. A humble king would ride on a donkey. A warrior would ride on a horse. Jesus is our humble king, and this is his entry into the holy city where his crown and throne await him. Ride on in majesty, in lowly pomp, ride on to die. O Christ, thy triumph now begins, o'er captive death and conquered sin. In fact, for Palm Sunday, I'm just looking through 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 readings for that day, just to take us through the events. In fact, the book doesn't begin at Palm Sunday because I decided that there was stuff happening beforehand that we just needed to engage with. So in that reading, I start off by saying after the business on the road. So you need to just to see in the book what it is that I'm referring to, because there was a journey taking place in order to begin this triumphal entry. So the book really is a guidebook for you. The idea is that you kind of have it in your handbag or your man bag or whatever it is, or your rucksack, and follow it through Holy Week and try to keep up with it, so that you're experiencing things as Jesus is experiencing, as the disciples are experiencing them. If I just turn on a bit to Maundy Thursday, I won't read the whole passage to you, but at 7 o'clock, I've got a chapter, a bit of a cheeky chapter for Maundy Thursday called Too Posh to Wash. So this is what I write. These are the passages from St. John's Gospel around Jesus washing the disciples' feet. Every office has them. Every home has them. People who are too posh to wash, who are happy to dump their used coffee mug in the sink and allow someone else to wash it up. Something had gone wrong on this evening. It might have been the stress of the whole week. It may have been not quite knowing what was happening. It might have been that the room, though all set up, didn't have a servant there to do it. But however it happened, there was no provision made for washing their feet as they came in off the dusty streets and took their place at the table. If you have a bunch of people who crave the seats at the left and right hands of Jesus in the kingdom, then I guess they are too posh to wash. Jesus notices. He notices everything. So it is he who gets up, takes off his outer garment, and kneels and washes their feet. Graham Kendrick wrote that well-loved hymn, Servant King. And that is what we now see in the upper room. And of course they are mortified. Peter, as ever, is the one who has to make the loudest noise, objecting to what Jesus is doing. But their lack of thought, their lack of humility, has been used by Jesus to teach us all a lesson. In our office kitchen in the cathedral, we have a sign that says, "This may be a community where other people wash your feet, but you're still expected to do your own washing up." Jesus teaches us that none of us is too posh to wash, to take our part in life, to serve and to be served, to give and to receive. Remember that when you next leave your cup for someone else to deal with. Remember that when you next pass a beggar in the street. And a prayer from St. Ignatius. Teach us, good Lord, to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labour and not to ask for any reward, save that of knowing that we do your will. Amen. So I hope you get the feel for what it is. Now, when we get to Holy Saturday, and I've got the opportunity to ride various hobby horses when I'm speaking to you this evening. When we get to Holy Saturday, I've tried to give you some space. And one of the things I think that we get quite wrong, but I understand why we get it wrong as a Christian community, is that the gift of Holy Saturday is often lost to those of us who are very much involved in church. And I suspect amongst all the people who are here this evening, there are a lot of people who are very much involved in church. So we've gone through Good Friday, all the agony of that. We're looking forward to Easter Day and all the joy that will come. And then we know, because somebody has got up on a Sunday, not some time before, and said, on Holy Saturday, or whatever you call it in your church, on Holy Saturday, we're going to have to get the church ready. So we're going to need a bunch of people who are going to be willing to come in and clean everything, polish everything, do the flowers, put all the hangings back and the altar, and do some ironing of the linens and this, that and the other. And I've got a rota at the back of church. And it'd be great if you could, because the more hands, the easier it will be. And there's the promise of bottomless coffee and hot cross buns in the vestry. So everybody turns up, and Holy Saturday becomes just a day of more and more activity. And we lose that sense of the church, as it were, being dead. Because as you know, when we come into church on Holy Saturday, if we come into the cathedral, we don't put the lights on. There's nothing dressed, and we don't bow to the altar. It's the day when the Eucharist isn't celebrated at all in any kind of way. And we just there saying our prayers in a very stark way, without glorias and everything at the end of Psalms. So it's really, really reduced to basics. And so for Holy Saturday, I've got just a very, very short reflection. 9 o'clock, Holy Saturday, they rested. And one line from Luke's Gospel. On the Sabbath, they rested according to the commandment. And we too rest and wait to see what tomorrow brings. In the depths of our isolation, we cry to you, Lord God, give light in our darkness and bring us out of the prison of our despair, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Now, you might expect the book to end at Easter. That would be logical. But you know, those of you who do know me know that if you give me a microphone, I can never stop talking. So when it came to Easter Day, I thought, oh, there's plenty more to say, Andrew. So I probably needed an even better editor than I had. But I decided that you can't really finish the journey without going through to Ascension and Pentecost. So when I was doing, there's an event that I've recorded with Paula Gooder across the river, because Paula's brought out another fantastic Lent book, and it's based on the Holy Week addresses that she delivered in Southwark Cathedral last year. So it's about giving voice to the voiceless women who are there in Holy Week. The Women of Holy Week, I think the book is called. It's lovely. If you heard the addresses, they were amazing as she tells the backstory, allows the women to tell their own story. The women whose names we only know, or some women who are simply not named but just mentioned as being there. So I was doing this with Paula, and Paula is a great interview, and she said, why on earth did you go on to Pentecost? Well, because I think that is when all of this is brought together by the church, and the early church is expelled from that locked space, from the upper room, sent out to proclaim the death, the resurrection, the glorification of our Lord Jesus Christ. And what the implication of that is for all those people gathered there in the street, and the church is unable to speak in their language to all of those people. So I didn't want to miss the opportunity of kind of completing the story. So, you know, if you buy the book, don't just put it away when you get to Easter Day and forget about it, because there is more. And of course, there's always more to say. You do have to bring the book to a conclusion somewhere, but you and I are writing all the chapters now in our own real time. That's the point of being a Christian. So this, though, is where I finish, 9 o'clock on the Feast of Pentecost. And the chapter is called In Real Time. But Peter, standing with the 11, raised his voice and addressed them. Men of Judah and all who live in Jerusalem, let this be known to you, and listen to what I say. Indeed, these are not drunk as you suppose, for it is only 9 o'clock in the morning. No, this is what was spoken through the prophet Joel. In these last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. And that's, of course, from Acts 2. It was still only 9 o'clock in the morning, but God doesn't hang around. God gets on with it. We began this journey on the way to Jerusalem, accompanying Jesus and his disciples on the road, through the gates of Jerusalem, to the cross, to the empty tomb, and then to the Mount of Ascension, and today to the street outside the room in which they had been for too long locked. This all happened in real time. God still works in real time. That is partly what the incarnation is about. God entering time, your time, my time, and making it divine time. In terms of eternity, now is but the twinkling of an eye. But God does not exist only in that eternal, timeless time, in the broad brush of forever. The kingdom of God is about now time, our time. And we are given real time in which to know God and work for the bringing in, the full realization of what the kingdom means. Peter is quoting the prophet Joel, as with his newfound voice he addresses the crowd. No, he is not drunk. Well, not in their terms, but he is inebriated in the spirit. He is drunk deeply of God, and as a new wineskin holds the new wine of the kingdom. So he quotes Joel and says, your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. This is what we are called to do in our real time, to have the vision and the dreams and the prophetic insight that sees the possibility and the reality of God in everything around us. The clock is always ticking, but we have time, God's time, to make the passion, death, resurrection and glory of Jesus real for every person, real for them, and real for us. May my today and tomorrow be your time, Lord, and may each moment be spent in making you known. Amen. So that's basically what the book is about. John will put up in the chat, there we are, how you can get it. There is a discount code. Hour is come to receive a 10% discount. There you go, from the Cathedral Shop, and it can be sent out to you. But if there's any, oh, poor Claire's bought it already. It's a bit late. There you go, Claire. Life's like that. If there's any questions, if you either want to put your hand up, if you know how to do that, or to put it into the chat, then, oh, Kate, that's very kind of you. Then I'll try and answer your question if you've got a question. So yellow hands or put it in the chat and we can respond to that. But oh, Zoe's got 2 copies. Well, there we go. Oh, Fiona, do you want to unmute yourself and yeah.
Thank you. I just wondered if you'd considered presenting this in an audio book format, because we have a neighbour who sadly cannot read anymore, and she was a voracious reader and she would love to study this sort of thing. She's only 91, and that's my question, and it sounds a wonderful book, and thank you very much indeed.
I hadn't thought of doing that. It sounds like a lovely idea. I'm not sure I've got time this year to do it, no. But I like the idea, and it's, you know, it's very short chapters, and it's the sort of thing that you could probably read together as well with other people who find a problem to do that. Yep. Yeah, but thanks for the idea, Fiona.
Okay.
Father Lee.
Hello, thank you. I don't know whether this is going off topic or not, but Holy Saturday, you talked about that. How do you hold Holy Saturday when they want to get in and put the flowers up and the brass has to be polished? And how do you maintain that kind of space where the church is dead while people are gearing up to celebrate?
I think it's a real problem. I think you almost need a rota of those who can actually have the time, you know, so that everybody's not absorbed in it and everyone's not exhausted by it. I mean, the other side of it is I've always enjoyed the bottomless coffee and hot cross buns, but I think when you were at Murfield as well, and we were all very much involved in the activities. Somehow, though, it's about probably suggesting people that they find some real time for meditation, for being silent and still at home at some stage in that day, would be really helpful to them. So to do some teaching, because I think we probably don't do enough teaching about what that day is for. So I think practically it's very difficult, Lee, because you know you don't want to be doing it all yourself, and priests need to have some of that time as well as the rest of the church. Sandra, and then I'll come to the question on the chat.
Oh, hiya. I think you probably mentioned this but my sound was dipping in and out, so I think I missed this part. I followed you when you did this on Twitter, and one of the great things was getting the alerts so that you knew when it was the time to listen, to read or listen to the next bit. Are you going to do something similarly during this Lent?
I've been asked if I will tweet at the time to remind people to read the book. So I believe there are ways to actually set that up so I don't have to sit around all day tweeting myself. So I'm going to try and discover how to do that. But yeah, it'll be quite good to give people a message and an alert.
Yeah, I bought a copy for a friend, and I wanted to do this to sort of like tell them. But what I was going to do actually was just to set an alarm on my phone during the morning to actually alert me.
That's very clever. So I've got a question from RC. I don't know who RC is, but particularly over the Triduum, I and others will be in church either preparing for or participating in service at the times when meditations are set. Do you have any suggestions on using the meditations at those times? Well, I think, I mean, I chose the times. I think if it doesn't work exactly to the hour for you, then try and work out how to make it work. I think the sort of things that we've done you can do with other people, and I know that it might be helpful in reflecting within a parish and doing something around that. So I think try and make it work as best you can within the pressures that you're under, because we're all working or doing other things at that time. So Father Bernard, I had a small rota of people who would prepare the church, different people every year, so that most of the rest of us could have a quiet Saturday. But that's, do you want to say anything about that, Bernard, as to how that worked?
Yes, indeed, Andrew. We had about 10 people who were sort of vergering in the church, and on a rota. So every year we chose amongst ourselves 3 or 4 people who would actually prepare, and then the next year they would not have to do that. Another group did that, and I only had to be there once to make sure everything was done, and then from that moment on that was passed on the way I wanted it for my liturgies, and that worked quite well.
That sounds a very good idea.
You need, of course, have at least 9 or 10 or 11 people.
Yes.
It doesn't work in very small villages, but my village was quite active in those things.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Kate has asked when you tweet, will you use a hashtag? Yeah, I'll use a hashtag so people know. But I get the feeling that would be really helpful to people for using the book through Holy Week. So that if there are no further questions, I want to thank you for joining us this evening.
I just had one, Andrew. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I put it in the chat, but my daughter was making such a noise. I thought I should put it in the chat instead.
Ask away, Claire.
I was thinking about your use of the term in real time and thinking of it in terms of human time. And my question was, do you think entering into the drama of the Passion remains as important a tool for understanding the mystery of our faith as it was in Egeria's time?
I think that I think it is really for me. I can only speak for myself. I think it's really important for me to realise that what's happening in that week is of a completely different order to what happens in any other particular week in the practice of our faith. And I think that the gospel writers also had that idea. When you read the gospels, the passion narratives are of a different nature to anything else that's there. So it isn't possible to say when such and such, when Jesus met the Syrophoenician woman, or this, that, and the other, when the miracles happened. But when we get to the events of that week, the gospel writers have are determined that we can in some way enter into those events at a different level and in a different intensity. So I think that they point us to the fact that these saving events are absolutely critical to the way in which we understand the nature of Jesus and God's love for us, how that's played out. So I think by participating as much as we can in that, we're doing what we've been called to do by the gospel writers. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how it's kind of felt to me, and why I felt I could do what I did with the text, because they're written in a quite different way from the rest of the texts that we receive.
Yes, I there is an extraordinary urgency, isn't there?
There is, and
a passion of their own in the narratives.
Yeah, and real time, because it's kind of the time I'm living in. That was what I was thinking about there.
Can I quickly ask?
Go on, Magnus. Nice to see you there.
Nice to see you too. After you have Easter, I always think my emotions go down, and in the week or two afterwards, everything's deflated. How do we keep the Easter message, the Easter hope going right through? Because it sounds like, and I don't have a copy of your book, it sounds like you have series of reflections up to Easter Sunday, and then you have a gap for 40 days until Pentecost. How do we keep?
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the challenges of faith, really, and one of the reasons why every Sunday is a celebration of the resurrection. I like what Taizé do. So Taizé has a little Good Friday and a little Holy Saturday and an Easter day every week, and they gear themselves around that because they understand how important it is that we live through that Triduum together, and that is an encouragement in our faith. But we do that in every church, every community, whenever we gather, and I like to always say, well, as you know, I've often said at the beginning, as we gather to celebrate again the resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ at the beginning of a Eucharist, just to remind people that that's why we're there. It's the start of the week and the end of the week, as it were, in the first and eighth day. So being constantly reminded of that, I think, helps us to maintain that deep sense of joy. And one of the things I was thinking about, because one of the problems when you've written a book, you want to write another book, and that's why the world is full of books. But I thought, I wonder what it'd be like to actually reflect upon all those resurrection appearances and how they worked for people, because I haven't done that in this book, because that wasn't the thrust of it. But I think you're right, but I think that applies to the whole of our Christian living. So that would be my answer, Magnus, when you're there with your community, to sort of constantly remember why it is that you're celebrating every Sunday.
Thank you.
Lovely. Well, nice to see you all, and I hope if you get the book, I hope you enjoy it and you find it useful, and thanks for various suggestions. I could now sit down and record an audio book, and I've got to work out how to do all the tweets and all the rest of it. There was, John, do you want to put up that message again as to what the discount code was and everything, if you're able to do that? Because once we stop, the chat disappears, doesn't it? Let me just have a look back. So it's hour is come, and you will find the online shop on the website. If you go to the shop section, and then there's a link through to the online shop, and you can find it there. Brilliant. Take care, everybody. God bless. And nice.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye.